Donnchadh mac Briain, formerly anglicised as Donough O'Brian, son of Brian Bóruma and Gormflaith ingen Murchada, was King of Munster. Background: Brian Bóruma was the first man to establish himself as High King of Ireland by force of arms alone in many centuries. Previous men reckoned High King had belonged to the great Uí kindred, that large group of families who traced the descent from Niall of the Nine Hostages, which dominated much of central and northern Ireland from the 7th century onwards. No king from the south, where Brian's kindred, that of the two rather obscure Dallchadh of the region of Thomond, had come close to dominating Ireland since the time of Feidlim mac Crimthain in the early 9th century, and none had been included in the more widely accepted lists of high kings in historic times. The last effective High King of Ireland from Munster was Cathal mac Fingon, and likely before him the prehistoric Crimthain mac Fideig. Brian, building on his own resources, and those of the Viking towns of the south such as Limerick and Cork, first took control of Munster, overthrowing the domination of the Eoghanachta, a kindred which had dominated the kingship of Munster as effectively as the Uí had dominated the High Kingship, and for just as long. With the Uí disunited, and the resources of Munster, Brian first brought the Uí High King Maelsegnal mac Domhnall to recognise him as an equal, and then as the master of Ireland. Brian met his death at the Battle of Clontarf on the 23rd of April 1014, Good Friday, fighting against the King of Leinster and his allies. In myth and medieval pseudo-history, this battle would become the last and greatest between the Irish and the Vikings, and Brian the greatest of all Irish kings. Life: Brian's son Murchada, Donnchad's half-brother, died with his father at Clontarf. Another brother, a half-brother, Domhnall, had died in 1011. Two other half-brothers, Conor and Flann, are mentioned in some sources but leave no trace in the Irish annals. So, of Brian's sons, only Donnchad and his half-brother Tadc are known to have survived the father. According to Geoffrey Keating's account in Faras Fisa Erin, an account which is not backed by any annalistic evidence, Donnchad, leading the survivors of the Dallchadh back from Clontarf, faced armies from Osraige and Munster which were face down. The Munster king lists have Brian followed by Donnchadh Donnchadh of the Cashel branch of the Eoghanachta rather than by one of his sons. Donnchadh did not die until 1025, at about the time that Donnchad started to make his presence felt outside Munster. His half-brother Tadc was assassinated in 1023. The annals of Tigernach add that this was done on Donnchad's order, while he had himself lost his right hand in what may have been a failed assassination attempt in 1019. Reign: beginning in the late 1050s, Donnchad came under attack from his neighbours. His nephew, Tadc's son Tuathail mac Briain, may have been the force behind these attacks. Donnchad's main rivals were Diarmaid mac Maelna King of Leinster from 1042, and Éideann Guy Bernaig, King of Connacht from 1046. Diarmaid in particular was a serious threat, allied with Niall mac Murchada, King of Ulster. He installed his son Murchada as ruler of Dublin in 1052, driving out Donnchad's brother-in-law and ally Ecmarcach mac Ragnail. Tuathail mac first joined with Éideann in the early 1050s, raiding into Tuathail in 1052 and inflicting a heavy defeat on Donnchad's son Murchad in Corkemute, the northwest of modern County Clare, in 1055. By 1058 Tuathail mac had gained Diarmaid's support, for he was present when Diarmaid, the Leinstermen and the Osraige drove Donnchad from Limerick, which he burned so that it would not fall into the hands of his enemies, and defeated him at Slabgcrot in the Galtee Mountains. pilgrimage, death and legends. Donnchad was finally deposed in 1063 and went on pilgrimage to Rome. He died the following year and was buried in the Basilica of Santo Stefano al Monticelio. Geoffrey Keating's Faras Fisa R. Erin recounts that Donnchad granted the crown of Ireland to the Pope Urban II according to Keating, who places these events in 1092, and asked for papal aid to return him to power. This story is repeated in many 19th century and earlier works of popular history and is given as an explanation of how the English Pope Adrian IV came to issue to the papal bull Laudabilita granting rule of Ireland to King Henry II of England. Elsewhere, Keating is more skeptical regarding other stories associated with Donnchad's time in Rome. He disbelieves claims that Donnchad took up with a daughter of a Holy Roman Emperor and had at least 2 sons from whom some later Old English families were descended. Keating writes that this story cannot be true, for before setting out on the expedition was a very old decrepit man of over 80 years of age, and it is not likely that an emperor's daughter would covet intercourse with such a veteran. In fiction, in Morgan Lee Whelan's novel Pride of Lions, Donnchad mac Briain is the main protagonist. It deals with the aftermath of Brian Bóruma's death and is the sequel to Lion of Ireland, the story of Brian Bóruma, High King of Ireland.